Hi everyone, welcome, and today, on today's Food for Thought, I have Grant Pretorius on with me, who's a chiropractor and a health coach. He's based in Farnham in Hampshire. Hello, Grant.
Hello, Deborah. How are you doing?
I'm fine, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Do you find that when people ask you that question, you don't say actually that you're under the weather?
No, I'm South African, so we're a little bit more down the line. But I do find that even when my patients come in and they're hobbling, I'm like, "How you doing, Mrs. Jones?" And they're like, "Oh no, I'm great, thanks." I'm like, "Well, you don't look great." I go, "Oh, actually, no, I am not great." But it is a sort of a knee-jerk reflex when it comes to salutations. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine, thank you.
It's funny that, because I do think in Britain the English will tell you they're fine anyway.
Exactly.
So now, firstly, explain to me what the difference is between yourself as a chiropractor and an osteopath, because I know the difference, but I know that lots of my clients don't really understand that there is a difference between the way the two of you practice. So,
I mean, do you know what, Deborah? I think that there is a lot of overlap. And I think there is going to be a lot of differences within the profession as well with regards to how one practitioner will approach a problem, whether a chiropractor, another chiropractor, or an osteopath, and another one. So I think people need to understand that there are different ways of approaching things even within the same profession. And I'm not an expert on osteopathy. My understanding is that they naturally do a lot more soft tissue work, but they are, still very skilled in spinal manipulation, which is, or joint manipulation, which is really moving joints from their normal range of movement into sort of the passive range, which usually breaks down some adhesions and gets things working. I believe also that their focus is a lot more on fluid movements as well, lymph drainage and these sorts of things, and blood flow. Chiropractic, which obviously I know a lot more about, is really focusing on the nervous system. What we try and do with chiropractic is we try and normalize the communication network that runs around the body, and the knock-on effect of that is a body that now works much more efficiently and can reestablish balance and normal optimum function, which is really what we try and do as chiropractors. So hopefully that answers that question.
That's really fascinating. So fundamentally, you are taking it back to cellular level and constantly looking at the communication of the cells between each other and how that whole body is going to communicate, not only on an individual cellular level, but also as a wider holistic picture structurally.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that is our aim. Obviously, most people come in because they have some sort of ailment, and that's always the main focus at the beginning, to try and get rid of, whether it be back pain or headaches or neck pain or digestive issues or whatever sort of brought the person in the front door. But really what we want to do ultimately is we want to normalize the system and make sure that it is working efficiently again. And there's different ways of trying to get an idea of where the blockages lie, and then correcting those. I personally use a lot of muscle testing because I find that is a really nice objective way of finding out what the person's deficiencies in particularly in movement are, and then I can be a lot more objective as to where I think, or where I make the input into their system so that they can make the best use of it. And other ways are obviously just feeling around the joint, looking at symmetry, looking at posture, and just palpating the areas and trying to get things that are stuck moving again. But yeah, essentially that's what we are looking at, is really trying to get that communication nice and efficient and working again, so the body can normalize and be as good as it is capable of being.
I love that. I love the fact that you're talking about it as in regards to communication. Now, what are the sort of things that people bring to you as a whole?
Again, it's most of the time it's a musculoskeletal issue. In other words, somebody's had some sort of a strain or a sprain in a muscle or a joint. That is 90% of the people that we do see, adults anyway. Babies and children are a little bit different, and I'll go over that in a second. But most the vast majority of adults or older sort of children in and around the sort of teens, they generally come in because they have had some sort of injury or some pain has come out of a seemingly non-traumatic origin. And what we usually do is we work towards just trying to calm down the injury and working through that. But ultimately, what makes chiropractic, the chiropractic focus, which is obviously different to a physiotherapist and an osteopath, is trying to normalize the nervous system and trying to make sure that the healing and the regulation of the body is back to normal. And often we actually start, a person will come in with back pain, start working with them, and they go, is it possible that my digestion could have improved? And you go, yeah, the nerves that go to your muscles go elsewhere as well. They go to your gut and all these sorts of things. People's asthma can improve, and concentration can improve, and loads of seemingly unrelated to the layperson anyway, ailments can start to improve. Now it's difficult because they are the issues can be multifactored with regards to where these issues come from. So it's very difficult for us to say to a person, oh yeah, your digestion is definitely going to improve and all these sorts of things. But it is a very nice side effect, and it's literally a side effect of a body starting to normalize. And if the reason why their digestion has gone wrong, or their concentration isn't what it should be, or they're metabolizing fat in a different way, or they're not sleeping correctly because they're in a fight and flight response, if the reason is that the spine is irritating, or there's a joint that's irritating a nerve and affecting the communication, when you remove that and you normalize the system, a really nice side effect of that is a body that works in a more efficient way, and everything is a lot happier. So it can be pretty wide ranging. Probably the most amazing reaction I've had from one of my patients is I adjusted her low back. She came in, she's a very, very good runner, one of the best runners in the country in her age group. And she came in with sports injury and low back pain, and I adjusted her, which is a chiropractic inputs, it's manipulation, we call them adjustments. And her sense of smell came back, and she said to me that's really interesting, because when she originally hurt her back, that was when her sense of smell went. And I mean, there is no neurological link, and if there's any medical doctors or anybody on that are listening to this, they'll go like, that's completely crazy, and I absolutely accept that it's completely unexpected. But I started working with her, and her sense of smell started to improve, and it was undoubted that this did happen, and it has stayed. So when you start to normalize these things, you start to get the messages going around the body the way that they're designed to. In other words, you remove the interference, amazing things can happen. I mentioned babies. Babies don't generally come in because they have back pain or complaining of headaches. Obviously, they can't really complain, but they usually come in because they're crying and the parents at their wits' end, and they're obviously uncomfortable, and it's kind of lumped in together as colic or infantile colic or unhappy baby syndrome, whatever you want to call it. But when we actually start to examine the baby, whether it be the spine, which is mostly, or maybe the cranial bones, or maybe other bones, it's less usual, but sometimes we do need to go into the extremities to find the problem. But when you actually start to normalize mechanics and movement in the spine and the skull, the nervous system again has a knock-on effect where it actually starts to normalize, and their digestion does get better, and they usually get better very, very quickly. And that's a really nice, pure way of seeing chiropractic and work, and what can actually happen when the interference is removed from the system.
I find it fascinating when clients come in, and I will have watched them walk through the clinic, and I can see that they've got a structural imbalance in some way due to the way they're walking and holding themselves, holding their arm and their head and things like this. And then they'll talk to me about the body systems that are out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I will start to think, right, I need to bring in a chiropractor. I actually work alongside a chiropractor, so I'll think I need to bring in a chiropractor to help me with this, but also what are the other issues? And as I dig down, they'll be quite surprised when I say, I can see something going on completely down the left-hand side. And they'll go, everything's going on down the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And yet they've not made the connection that it's their posture as well that's actually impacting on their body systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean we see it all the time. It's the structure really often does determine the function, and you start to normalize the structure and the function usually follows. And normal's really good, Most people don't realize that normal is actually just where you're feeling okay. Normal's optimum, when everything's working perfectly and harmoniously, the best you've ever felt, that's normal. And I think that's that people need to really start to strive towards that, as opposed to just feeling okay and maybe be able to take 10 steps on their way to work without getting breathless. We all need to sort of strive to feel excellent.
But how do people know what normal is if they've never experienced it?
That's a very good question. And I think it's a moving goalpost. I don't think you can ever get it. I mean, it's like fitness, how fit can a human being get? And I don't know. And most of us can be fitter. There's probably some guys that are as fit as they possibly can be, but I think most of us, it is a moving goalpost, and I think all you need to constantly do is look at what makes us healthy, what keeps us healthy, and constantly work towards doing that, because it's a non-stop endeavor. It's not something that if you're healthy today, and today I've eaten beautifully. My diet's absolutely great. My exercise has been great today. However, if I don't do what I need to do constantly in 3 months' time, if I start to smoke cigarettes, which I don't do, but and eat junk food and don't move around and start to think in a negative way and impact my health in all different directions, in 3 months' time I'll be a mess. So it is a constant endeavor. And the tricky thing is that the sensory nervous system, which most people don't realize, is actually only makes up 10% of all the information that our body's processing, or that our nervous system's processing. So we don't really get a warning of ill health until it's pretty bad. There's a quote that I've read that says that organ function has to be depleted by up to 60% before you actually get a symptom. So, judging your health and your symptoms is not really the way to do it. You need to have other parameters to do that. I use some technology as well that gives me a lot of information about people's nervous systems. It's called an inside subluxation station. It's been used by NASA, and it's been endorsed by the Space Foundation. So there's credibility there, but that gives me some cool objective readings about heat patterns around the spine, muscle tone around the spine. We can measure range of movements, sensitivity in the spine, and then what we also do is we check heart rate variability as well. And heart rate variability is a really important part and a really important measure that we can use to find out how balanced the nervous system is and how healthy the how varied the heart rate is, which has a lot of implications with regards to cardiovascular health and nervous system health and interaction. So I think we do need objective tests and parameters to sort of look at and not sort of wait for disease to show up and assume, okay, now we're sick, or to feel okay and then assume we're well. I think there's objectivity that's required, but then it's like a plant. What a plant needs. A plant needs sun, it needs water, it needs nutrients. it needs air, it needs good clean air, and you give it that, and it's young enough, it's not completely old and dying anyway. The plant will thrive. And the human being is exactly the same. It's more complicated, but there are some fundamental things that we have to give our bodies. And if you do, then you move to normal. You move towards balance and homeostasis and health. So I think the measurements are important, but I think if we just give our bodies what we need, we don't really need to measure it as much. We just do what's required.
I understand in regards to what you're saying with the, our organ systems when they're showing symptoms, and it's often way down the line in regards to the drop in performance. And I liken it to the dashboard of a car. In effect, it's got to the point where you've really got to stop. But many people have overridden these signs over and over again, and it is disease states. And then people feel that it's something that's happening to them, and that it's actually not their responsibility. The medical people are very much ingrained to say it's almost it's not the individual's responsibility, but actually it's just something. It's genetics. It's lack of luck. This is happening. Is that actually the case? Because I don't believe that is.
Yeah, I think you're actually spot on. We do need to take responsibility for our health, and the genetics. I mean, so the medical profession, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-medicine. However, I think we do need to clarify what they can and can't do, and certainly their model is based on the germ theory, where you get germs and that makes you sick, or the genetics that you're predisposed to get something. And what we are seeing more and more of is that actually the environment plays a much more crucial role than external factors. So, internal environment and external environment as well. And getting sick and then giving yourself a pill to remove that symptom, because that's all it is. It's a symptom. It's the body's cry for help. It's using that dashboard analogy that you use. It's the oil light coming on. Do you take the bulb out or to get rid of that annoying flashing light, or do you actually put oil in it? Do you actually try and find out why that light's on in the first place? And I think the medical profession is of the opinion that you can cover up a symptom and then another symptom might pop up and you cover that one up and you go and you go and you go, and it doesn't work long term. And what we need to do is really try and identify why the body's going wrong, and even better to actually just understand what the body needs, and give it that, and then and if there is a crisis, if there is a trauma, or you do, even aside from your best intentions, you do get some horrible virus or something like that, then yeah, great. Medical profession's great. They're great in acute situations. They're great in trauma. It's when they actually start to go into chronic phases, when disease go into chronic phases, that's where medicine actually starts to become less effective, because medicine is a chemical. It's unnatural. Your body doesn't really require that to be healthy. So although it can make you more comfortable in certain areas, it's going to have a price to pay in other areas, whether it's your liver being toxified or other things. So I think just identifying and getting people to understand what is required for health, I think, is the starting point. And then we go from there.
So fundamentally, when we had our original conversation, you outlined you're a health coach as well. Is that part of the work that you're doing in regards to working on what you're fundamentally saying there is prevention, so that people don't actually end up with you as a chiropractor or someone like myself or the GP in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about education. And yeah, that is why I'm moving to much more towards the health coaching side. I love chiropractic and I think it's great, and I don't think that there will ever be we'll never be without a need for chiropractors, osteopaths, physiotherapists, naturopaths, GPs, surgeons, all these sorts of things. However, I think with the right education, the right guidance, and the right understanding, and maybe a few paradigm shifts, people will be able to take more responsibility for themselves and actually be able to require these things less. I think probably the main key things that I try and teach my clients and my patients is that essentially there's two things that move us away from health. And it's either toxicity, in other words, you have something in your environment, internal or external environment, that you don't require and it is damaging to you. And the other one is a deficiency. So you got toxicities or deficiencies. In other words, a deficiency is something that you do require, but you don't have enough of it. And really the main categories of health, or the sort of, what makes us human, is the emotional side of things, there's the physical side of things, and then there's the chemical side of things. And I think when we start to move away from what is normal, health, because that is normal, I think that's also another paradigm that needs to be shifted, that health, optimum function is normal. It's not luck. That's how we are programmed to be. 99% of us are born healthy, thankfully. We do get unfortunate situations, but most of us are born healthy, and that is our innate state. And if we can ask ourselves when we do move away from health, what am I toxic with? What am I deficient in? And if you understand what you require and what you don't require, you can quite easily answer those questions and make the right decisions, and also seek out the right person if you do need some external help. So that's one of the main key things that I keep repeating over and over, is that those are the questions you need to ask. Don't ask what drug or what surgery do I need. Again, using the plant analogy, you don't look at a plant and it's starting to wilt and you go, oh geez, I need to go to the plant doctor and find some sort of antibiotic. You just think, okay, the soil's a bit dry, let's give it some water, and you give it a few things that it requires, and the plant bounces back. I think one of the main other things that answer a lot of the questions about what does the human body require, I think we need to understand that our physiology, our DNA hasn't really changed much in 40,000 years. And what we were doing 40,000 years ago is very, very different to what we do now day to day. We were hunter-gatherers. We were, running, throwing, jumping, being very physically active, and not just physically active in one plane like perhaps a cyclist might be, but physically active in all planes. You were extending, you were jumping, reaching, throwing, sprinting, and that's a very different sort of exercise program than even a triathlete might do. So that's the physical side of things. We were eating organic food that was in season. There wasn't a lot of grains and sugar available to us, so most of it was nuts and some fruit and vegetables and the meat that we could get our hands on. Emotionally, we were very well supported. We lived in tight communities of generations all living together. And I think if we can understand those main fundamentals of what, and that's really what our body needs to be healthy, is that environment that's congruent with our physiology. I think if people understand that and study that a little bit further, they'd be able to answer the questions of what are they toxic with, and what are they deficient in. Because if you just try and get your system into that sort of environment, you're going to move towards health and away from sickness.
But I find that a lot of my clients do not realise that they're toxic, in all honesty, have absolutely no idea that some of the illnesses and pain and everything that they're experiencing through their body is caused via the different foods or fluids or the lack of fluids that they're actually consuming. and they think, in all honesty, that they're doing absolutely the right thing. And many people will arrive on my doorstep with one specific issue that they've not resolved. And then as I unpack it, it will turn into this whole stack of things that I will see holistically. But they will tell me, I've had really good health until this happened. But as I actually unpick it, suddenly I see this whole map unfold in front of me, and so I can see how they've got to this current picture. But they will consider that they have had good health despite having headaches all their lives, stomach aches all their lives, bowel issues all their lives. It's one major thing. So how, I think I'm just going to challenge you in regards to how do people who really think that they are healthy until one issue triggers their questioning, actually, how do they know that to ask themselves about that toxicity level? Because there's so many messages now out there from the media which says this is healthy for you to eat, this is natural, even when it's not. How do they make their way through all this information and actually understand that they are toxic?
I think it comes down to, just understanding what a hunter-gatherer had available to them. And I think, if we're talking about diets, let's talk about diets with toxicities and deficiencies. You need to be looking at a diet that had almost no grains and sugar in it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest chemical dietary toxicities in our systems, is that we're pretty much addicted to grains and sugars. And there wasn't dairy as well. The hunter-gatherer wasn't sort of chasing wildebeest and sort of milking them while they were running away. There's no other mammal that actually has any form of milk after they're weaned, and yes, there is calcium in milk, but there's a lot of studies that show that actually we don't really absorb a lot of the calcium that's in milk, and we actually get a lot more calcium from vegetables. So I think just looking, so how do people know, whether they're doing the right thing or not, and sort of figuring out what is good information, what is bad information. I think it comes down to common sense and the knowledge that we haven't really changed as animals in 40,000 years. However, our lifestyles and our habits have changed massively. And I think if we try and emulate, a good place to look at if people are looking to understand more about this is the paleo diet, which is the caveman, so to speak, diet of very little grains, very little sugar, no grains and sugar if you can really help it, having nuts and seeds, having some fruit but not enormous amounts of fruit, eating loads of vegetables, and eating meat, and if you're a vegetarian, then having some sort of protein substitute. So I think looking at that, if you're looking at toxicity, deficiency in exercise, you need to be asking your body to sort of behave in a very functional way. Most of us never really take our spines into extension, and it's so important from a chiropractic point of view. If you actually move into extension enough, a lot of we call them subluxations, but the fixated areas, the areas that are stuck, that you can actually break down a lot of that, especially if you're doing it regularly. If it's really, really stuck, then you pretty much need some help. But if you're doing it habitually, you will be breaking down those areas on your own anyway. Emotionally, we need a tight community around us. We also are in emotional stress most of the time that our body doesn't know how to deal with, because again, when we were evolving, we had acute stressors. So you had a tiger that would jump out at you, and your fight and flight response would kick in, and they would save your life if you got lucky. So you either fight the tiger off or you run away. And that physical burst of energy, and we all know how we feel after a good physical burst of energy. There's good hormones that sort of kick in, and you sort of feel a bit euphoric. And I do believe that explosion of energy and exercise, whatever that needs to happen to have gotten that hunter-gatherer out of that bad situation, very quickly switched off that fight and flight response and got them back to sort of a normal state. However, we, or the people in the westernized areas, are pretty much living with that tiger in the room, so to speak. You've constantly got this emotional stress that's creating the fight and flight response, and a lot of our chronic diseases can be linked to the fight and flight response. Your insulin levels go all over the place, so obesity, diabetes. Your immune system takes a knock because you're not worried about fighting the cold virus when a tiger's chasing you. Your immune system's enormously metabolically demanding, so you want to use everything you've got, all the energy you've got to go to your muscles and your alert sensors to get you out of danger. So your immune response takes a knock. So then chronic, illnesses and cancer and all that sort of thing can be linked to immune deficiencies from that point of view. So it's I think it's as complicated as you want to make it, but I think it's also very simple if you look at where we've come from and try and get our environments as close to that as possible. And I think an important point to make here is that the 80-20 principle works with this. In other words, if you're doing the right sort of stuff, you know what the right sort of stuff is, like what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. I think that's a big key to it. So eating as congruently or as innately as possible. Looking at the paleo diets. And then 20% of the time you are having the odd, pizza or you're having the glass of wine or whatever. You don't have to completely be 100% with this, but I think if 80% of the time you are doing the right things and 20% of the time you're not, you will be moving in the right direction. It's when you flip that on its head, where 80% of the time you're eating badly, you're not moving well, and you're thinking in negative ways, and only 20% you're thinking well and you're moving well and you're eating well, then you're in trouble.
It is interesting about, the whole 80-20 rule. I run that myself. But I believe that a little bit of what you fancy has become a lot of what you fancy. And most people are treating themselves continuously through the day to chocolate bars, to biscuits, and they think they're not having anywhere near as much. And when I get people to keep a diet diary, and I say, look, I'm not here to judge you, but all of a sudden, they see that actually a little bit of what they fancied is actually a lot of their diet, a lot more than they actually realized.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. And I think when you actually do a food diary, or you do whatever, exercise diary, or even, an emotional inventory, I think you kind of realize that you're actually doing a lot more of the bad stuff than you're actually let on to yourself as well. One of the helpful tools that I use with my clients is I get them to do something that their body's required to be healthy before they do something that is not required for health. So I don't actually, I say to them, do you know what? Let's talk about 3 things that are absolutely untouchables. Okay, doc, there's no ways I can give up my cigarettes and my beer and my pizza. And go, okay, fine. Those are non-touchables, all right? Can you please eat an apple before you have a beer? Or, could you have a pint of water before you have it? You'll actually start to not crave the stuff that's bad for you. Unfortunately, the converse is also true, because when you have something that's bad for you, your body goes into a stress response. So you're in this fight and flight, which demands more sugar and demands fat, and then you actually start to crave things that are sugary and fatty and all that sort of stuff. So there is the downward spiral, but there's also the upward spiral. So what I recommend to my patients, what I do for myself as well, I'm just human. I'm exactly the same, But if there is something that I do want to do that I know is not going to, do me any favors, I'll do something. I'll go for a walk, or I'll write down my gratitude list, or I'll read my gratitude list, and so do something. It doesn't have to be nutritional. You don't have to eat a salad every time you want to do something bad, something that isn't good for you. But you need to look at the emotional, chemical, and physical side of things. So before you have a beer, go for a run. And you get back, and what do you want? Do you want a beer, or do you want a glass of water? And suddenly you actually start to change your behavior by just doing those little things, and I find that is really effective, and the more you do that, the more you move in the right direction.
And it's the small steps, isn't it, as far as I'm concerned, that take you down that bigger journey.
Absolutely. That's why diets don't work.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, I need to lose X amount of pounds or stones or kilograms, whatever you want to speak on, and then it's that, and they live through a time that is not a good time. They're depriving themselves of things that they like, and they possibly eating and doing things that they don't want to be doing or eating, and that's not something that's sustainable. There's just no way you can ever do that. So it's much better to not feel like you're depriving yourself, but still actually start to move in a few healthy habits, and almost have a reward system, but certainly making sure that you do something that your body does require before you do something that your body doesn't require, and then you don't feel like you're depriving yourself, and you actually start to get the healthy cravings and move towards what is healthy and congruent, and away from the other. And like you said, it's a much more slow process, but it's far more sustainable. And that's really what we want to do. We want to move people towards health and away from disease, because every single decision that we make, every single thing that happens on a day-to-day basis can be divided into two things: stuff that is good for you and stuff that is bad for you. So things that are going to move you towards health and homeostasis or balance, or things that are going to move you away from it. It's that simple. And you just got to be doing more stuff that's moving you toward, and less stuff that moves you away. And that's the path that I want to encourage people to move towards.
Yes. Now, I don't think people realise the impact that their stress has on their overall health, or their thinking due to stress. Now, you've touched on the thinking and you've touched on the stress. Do you want to just go into a little bit more detail about that for us? Because I know the impact it has, but I'm not sure that everybody really does.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to the fight and flight response, that sort of stress response that you speak about. And I think it's also, people need to understand that whether you're thinking about a tiger attacking you or whether a tiger is attacking you, your body's reacting. So if you're having bad negative thoughts, your body doesn't necessarily know whether it's a thought, or it doesn't differentiate physiologically. In other words, your actual body's reaction to a thought is very similar to the actual situation happening. So when you're thinking about negative, stressful situations, your body will go into a fight and flight response, which is, like I said, designed for acute danger. It's not designed to be something that is in a chronic setup. And when we are in a chronic state of fight and flight, or this stress response, we go into an adaptation phase. In other words, our body starts to adapt to that. So, for example, when you are in this stress response, there's a few things that happen. One, your blood flow increases to your muscles so that you can be stronger and faster with regards to your physical exertion, because you're either going to need to fight or run in that state, or where the sexual reflex or adaptation that we've evolved has come from. You're going to shut down your digestive areas, because again, it's metabolically or it's physiologically demanding, so you're not going to really be digesting your food correctly. Your immune system is going to shut down, because you don't really, there's bigger issues. there's a tiger or an elephant or a lion that's kind of chasing you. You're not going to worry about, a cold virus or cutting your finger. From an emotional and concentration, alertness side of things, you become very alert of your environment, but your memory starts to go. When again, it's not important for you to memorize a shopping list when a tiger is chasing you, so your concentration and your memory kind of goes. However, you become very alert. You're like your peripheral vision really sort of becomes a lot more available to you, and your eyes dilate and all these sorts of things. So I think understanding what happens to you when you're in this fight and flight response you can sort of see what happens then. So, actually when you're in this fight and flight response, when you're in a stressful relationship, or your work is stressful, or you've even from whatever's gone on in your past, even if things are great, you have this negative internal dialogue that creates that stress, and you go into this low level stress response. Your nutritional absorption is going to go down. So even if your diet's very good, if you're in this fight and flight response, you're not going to be absorbing as well as you should do. You're not going to be eliminating waste products as well as the waste of your food is going to go down as well. Your concentration, your mental ability and mental agility goes down as well. What else we're looking at? So on a physical side of things, we're looking at fatigue as well, and tension in the muscles, which make you a little bit more vulnerable to picking up a pencil and tearing things. So I think people really need to understand that when they are in an emotional stress situation, like with any situation, really, it's a global response. Your body will respond globally. And I think a really important point that I nearly missed out is the immune response as well. So the immune system is actually going to be suppressed when you're in an emotionally stressed situation. And not only is that going to make you more vulnerable to the common cold coming along and attacking you, but we've all got cancer cells in us, and it's our immune system's responsibility to find those defective cells and destroy them. And if everything's working fine, that happens. It happens all the time. It's when we're actually starting to move away from that normal ability to identify these things, that these things take hold and then we move along. And pretty much, if you actually start to look at it, the top 5 killers are all down to lifestyle choices, and most of them can actually be linked to how our body goes into the stress response and the chronic stress response, and our body's inability to sort of deal with that fight and flight response on a chronic, ongoing basis. It was never designed to be that way.
And I know from working with a number of my clients that effectively they don't actually realise they're under a level of stress, a lot of them, because it's just become ingrained in their life. And I say, I'm not stressed. And yet as we start to work on the different factors, they'll suddenly realise that actually they are stressed, they are quite overwhelmed, but they've just learnt to manage it, but it's chronic in their life. Yeah,
absolutely. And they're adapting to it, as you said. And then and eventually that adaptation leads to fatigue.
Yeah.
And that's when they symptomatically break down. So up until that point, their symptoms are not on the surface. They don't realize that it's happening. It's kind of like a heart attack or a stroke. You don't actually feel the arteries clogging up until boom, it happens. Yeah. And it is that it's that adaptation that their body goes through, and then you go from adaptation to fatigue, and that's when it's becomes an issue.
And this is where often they'll go on holiday and they become ill, and they've been fine, and then they'll come and say, I was on holiday and I ended up being ill, and you're like, yeah.
Or they go on holiday and I know you're working a lot more on the illness side of things. I'm working a lot more on the musculoskeletal side of things, and it's just like I can't believe it. The first week of my holiday, my back went. So they're like, it's because suddenly your body's actually dealing with stuff. It's it's all coming out. It's bubbling up to the surface. So that is a common thing.
And the other thing is the aging process that people go through when they're under that level of stress, which is much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there you go. We don't need to find a cure for aging. We just need to age at a normal rate. Because again, I think everybody's, the things that our current environment, it accelerates that aging process. It puts way too much stress on the system. But the good news is that all of the stuff can be turned around, by making some adjustments and some awareness and education. People can start to make the right choices, and most of our body is replenished every sort of 12 weeks. Some of it takes a bit longer, 6 months. Some of it takes a couple of years. That's a very, very small part of it. Most of you pretty much get a brand new body every quarter, which is really exciting. So, whatever the decisions that you make now, and you continue with them over a sort of a 3-month period, you'll be completely different. So, none of the stuff is, well, most of it, and depending on how far into fatigue you are, if you're just in the adaptation phase or early in the fatigue phase, in other words, your body hasn't completely broken down, most of the stuff is reversible, and you don't need medication to do it. You just need to change your environment and change the way you think, change the way you move, and change the way you eat. And the body has an amazing capacity to heal.
It does indeed. Suggest 3 things to my audience that they could do that would make a difference for their health, from your perspective.
Eat well, move well, and think well.
Now, I just have one more question, which is, you've said about taking the spine into extension. What do you mean by that? Oh,
sorry. It's like a backward bend. So we don't really backward bend at all. We pretty much are sitting down or walking. And when you're walking, there may be a little bit of extension in the lower back, but pretty much you're kind of leaning forwards and you're trying to propel yourself forwards without using too much energy. People that will go into extension, swimming, you go into a bit of extension. People that do yoga go into extension. People that do Pilates, those sorts of functional sorts of things, you do go into extension. However, what I find with those people is that they don't do enough strength training. So then you kind of get an imbalance, because everything that you do has a price and it has a benefit when it comes to everything. But when we're talking about exercise and actual sort of movement patterns, you need both flexibility, but then you also need strength, and then most importantly, you need control. So yeah, so a lot of my yoga patients and my friends that do yoga, they pretty much only do yoga, and I think that is a mistake as well. I think you need to be cross training, and cross training is often thought of, I'll run and I'll cycle and I'll swim. But really what you want to be doing is you want to be doing 3-dimensional functional movements. So you want to be ramping your heart rate right up to, full blast for, X amount of minutes, depending on how fit you are, and then bring it back down again and do that sort of interval stuff. You need to be doing global movements, going into extension. You want to be climbing and pulling up and doing all these sorts of things. You want to be doing some cardiovascular exercise. And I think one of the biggest movement deficiencies that we have is that we just don't ever backward bend. It's in daily life, it almost never happens. And that's where a lot of the restrictions in the spine are going to come from, and a lot of the postural imbalances when you're looking at a person from the side are going to come from, because we're sort of sitting in this flex position in front of a computer at a desk, eating, reading, driving, watching the TV, whatever's going on. We're pretty much in this flex position. Our head goes forwards, our pelvis is rotated, so our hip flexors get tight, our head moves forwards, and we become that shape. We kind of become that sort of C shape. And we just lack that extension. So as far as a functional tip goes, get your body into extension, lie down in the evenings on your tummy and sort of rest on your elbows, and just allow that your lower back to get into a bit of an arch watch TV doing that as opposed to going from one chair to another.
I'm just imagining myself going into extension. Trying to watch.
Why does it scare you?
No. I do yoga, so
Good.
I can do that. But I'm just thinking about doing it whilst watching TV at the same time,
Yeah.
and it being upside down.
Yeah, you don't have to do a full backward bound. I'm talking more about just lying on your stomach and just going into like a sphinx position. You know, so basically like how the sphinxes are. You know, they got their arms sort of their front legs sort of going out in front of them like that. So basically your arms, you just need your elbow right underneath your shoulder. You're lying in your tummy, elbow right underneath your shoulder, and elbow bent to 90 degrees. And then just sort of sink into that. And initially, because it's such an alien position, it'll feel really uncomfortable. So what you do then is if it is feeling uncomfortable, just lie back down. You just lie on your tummy, let it ease, get back into it. And I recommend to my patients, it's actually called Mackenzie's exercise, to be doing that sort of, a good 10 minutes a day in the evenings. Just get a good extension and stress in there, and that can help a lot.
Brilliant. Okay. That does seem less gymnastic, I have to say.
Yeah, you don't watch TV upside down.
So, Grant, how do people get in contact with you if they want to know more about you, your practice?
Yeah, well, I mean, our telephone number is one of the ways, and it's kind of old school, I guess, these days. But our telephone number for the clinic is 01252 235 310. That's a Farnham number. We're in the sort of border of Surrey and Hampshire. And you can email us at info at farnhamchiropractic.co.uk. And what other ways? I guess that's most. And you can also look at our website, which is www.farnhamchiropractic.co.uk. So those are the ways that you can find out. Well, the couple of ways you can make inquiries, and then just find out more about us on our website, where we are, and a few of the things. I try and write a blog, but like all these things, it's time consuming, and there's always other things to do. So I'm trying to get better at putting my thoughts down on paper and posting that. I've got a few things on there, but I need to work harder. Just keep the education flowing into the public's mind, so that we can get people moving in the right direction.
Fantastic. Today on Food for Thought, I've had Grant Pretorius from Farnham Chiropractic on over in Hampshire. Thank you very much, Grant.
Thank you very much, Debbie.